DND number 8, June Flower, in Jesus' name, chapter 12. He told me to go on. He said he was right behind me, Agent Carson explained to his boss, Jason Lee. Jason frowned as his mind went over the possibilities. Is there a problem? Justin Lee asked as he joined his brother. Jason eyed his older brother. Justin was a champion warrior, and Jason preferred to not tell him his concerns at this moment, but if he didn't tell him, he'd worry anyway. Besides, Eric Keno had been Justin's best friend for the past 45 years. Justin had a right to know. He sighed. Eric and Shelley aren't here yet. Justin eyed his watch. Did they leave the same time as everyone else? Agent Carson shook his head. They were the last ones. They told me to go on. Mr. Keno said he would be right behind me. And how long have you been here? Justin asked, his voice rising in pitch as the worry set in. 20 minutes. Justin took out his phone and called Eric's phone. Jason waited patiently, even though Justin had to know that Jason had already tried to call him several times. Justin frowned when it went to message. Have you, Justin began. I've tried Shelley's phone too, Jason cut in. I don't feel good about this. Hey, Jason, have you heard from Dad? Ricky asked as he swung over on his crutches. Ricky looked from one brother to the other, to Agent Carson. His smile faded away. What's going on? Your father should have been here by now. That's what's going on, Justin said. Ricky drew a calming breath. Okay. Who was the last to see him? I was. They said they were right behind me. Did you actually see him leave the house? No. Here they come, Breeze cried out from her place by the window. She pointed at the approaching plane for Sophia's benefit. Look, sweetie, here comes Daddy. After being distracted by Breeze's words, Jason glanced out the large window, then turned back to his conversation. I've already called the local PD. I'm waiting for them to call me back once they get to the house. Well, let's just pray they find everything in order. I mean, if I know Dad, he and Shelley took advantage of being alone and the time got away from them, Ricky said hopefully. A few seconds later, Jason got the call, and they watched him as he spoke and knew it wasn't good. He finally hung up and looked up at his brother and Eric's son. Both front and dining room doors were open. There are signs of a struggle, broken dishes, lamps, etc., furniture knocked over. He paused and drew a breath. And there is a dead man on the kitchen floor. His throat has been slit. Ricky cursed, then looked up. Maybe it's not as bad as it looks. Maybe Dad won the battle and took off with Shelley. I don't think so, Jason continued. There was a knife stuck through a piece of paper lying on the counter. It said, "Come and save them, Dr. Keno." There was a large cheer from the other side of the room as a jet taxied to a halt and everyone ran out the door to greet the warriors returning home. Jason, Justin, Ricky, and Agent Carson glanced out the window to see the jet door open and Joey appear to make sure the steps were secure. He then backed up and allowed Jeffy to precede him down the stairs. While outside, the large group converged on the tarmac. Jason spoke fiercely. I'm headed back. Agent Carson, grab Dawson, Fillmore, White, and Norton and come with me. Yes, sir, Carson said as he went quickly to grab the others. Ricky, Justin, the two of you have the bad luck of filling everyone else in. Ricky nodded. There you are, Bree said from the doorway. Come on, silly. You're the one who demanded to be here, bad leg and all. Hey, she said, looking around. Where's Mom? Ricky frowned. Gather everyone together for me, Bree. We have some bad news. New scene. Jason arrived at the Keno estate the same time as the FBI and merely watched as the feds cleared and turned away the catering company that Shelley usually employed. The local police department, who'd investigated originally, seemed happy to turn the case over to the feds. Having consulted for and worked with the Bureau many times before, it was nothing new for Jason to go through the house with them now. Jason filled Special Agent Moore in on everything that had taken place with the Kenos over the past year and a half. Some of it Moore had known. Some he was surprised by. They'd been discussing the possible directions the perps would take with this kidnapping when there was a commotion at the front door. I'm sorry, ma'am, this is a crime scene. I don't care what it is. It's my home. They're my parents, and I'm coming in. Jason headed for the door. He immediately waved off the goons. It's okay. Let them in. The majority of the crowd of family and friends stayed in their cars in the driveway, yet Jeffy and Ricky, Bree, Mark, and Joey, along with Ameritech agents Keegan, Jeff, and Cam, entered the crime scene. Joey introduced them to Special Agent Moore and let him know that the last four worked for Ameritech and had just returned from the Kazakhstan/African mission. Jeffy, trance-like, walked immediately toward the kitchen. I don't think you should, Agent Moore began. They followed her. She stepped carefully around the workers who were closing the body bag and put her hand to her head and drew a sharp breath. Daddy killed that man, she said as tears ran down her face. Well, we're not sure what. She closed her eyes. Oh, he did. He killed him. He cut him with a knife. She reached one finger out to point at the knife on the counter. He cut him with this knife. Her hand ran over her own throat. He was concerned about Mom and me. He was determined to kill them all if he had to, but there were so many. 5, no, 10. She stepped backward and grabbed her stomach. Mom is hurt. They punched her. She fought hard, but they hit her so many times she got dizzy. Bree sniffed as the tears ran down her face. Joey and Mark visibly winced as they pictured their mother fighting for her life and Eric unable to protect her. Ricky stood still, his face a mask of calm. Mom lost consciousness, Jeffy continued as she dropped to her knees. Here. She fell here. And Dad, She stopped and pressed her trembling hand to her mouth. He is in such turmoil. His mind is racing a mile a minute, going over every option he has. He decides to surrender. If he doesn't, they will kill Mom right here, right now. They told him to drop the knife, and he put it down on the floor. She stood and pointed toward the dining room doors. They left through there. Moaning, she gripped her abdomen. Her knees collapsed, but Cam had been watching her closely, and he rushed forward, catching her before she went down. He held her tightly against his chest and walked out to the living room and lowered her gently onto the couch. Special Agent Moore stood in the kitchen, dumbfounded. Is she for real? I've read the case files. I know she's considered psychic, but there was no big deal made about that. Well, we try to play that down. She's had a hard time harnessing it, Ricky explained. Sometimes she's precognitive. Sometimes she can feel, see, or sense something that's happened in the past. She struggles with the integration of the messages, and sometimes they're clear and sometimes they make no sense to her. You say she has a hard time harnessing it? You mean she never knows when it will come over her? He shrugged. Well, she can be psychic on purpose if that's what you're asking, but she usually only does that if she's doing psychic exercises with Dad or if she's concerned about someone and she tries to read them. Most times it just comes over her without her trying. Like now. Yeah, like now. How accurate is she? Ricky shrugged. I've never known her to be wrong, though she's had visions and dreams that she feels are precognitive that have never happened, at least not yet. She usually doesn't focus on reading the past or future. Her main talent is being able to connect with the patient's mind and help them to heal. That's where she focuses her abilities, which I suppose is why she's made the medical discoveries she's made. Because she can look inside and diagnose a patient? Oh, not just diagnose. She sort of joins with them and uses her mind to help them to heal. And you believe she can actually heal, like some spiritual healer? Look, I don't care if you believe me. I know she can use her psychic ability to figure out what's ailing a person and somehow communicate with them subconsciously to help them to heal, or she can see the best way to heal them. She once told me sometimes it's like a book opens in her mind and shows her the cure. It also shows her the prevention. My sister, Special Agent Moore, is an amazing young lady. Which is why we need to keep her safe, Jason added. He glanced at Ricky. I don't want her left alone for a minute. Special Agent Moore nodded. That would be advisable. I have it covered, Jason said quickly. Fine. I doubt the perps will try to get to her with the entire family around her. Well, that's not what I'm worried about. If I know Jeffy, she'll try to go out and find her parents, Jason said. Jason watched the agent's face and knew what he was thinking. He was thinking of allowing Jeffy to do just that. He was thinking about using her to set a trap for the perps. However, as far as Jason was concerned, it was too risky to send her out. Besides, there was no guarantee that if Jeffy gave herself up, they would take her to where they're holding Eric and Shelley. Ricky watched this exchange. He, too, knew what they each were thinking, yet he had his own ideas. Turning, he went to the living room where Bree, Mark, and Joey had joined Jeffy and Cam. Ricky strode up to Jeffy and knelt down in front of her and took her hand and spoke softly. I swear to you, Jeffy, I'll do everything and anything it takes to get them back. We'll leave no stone unturned. We'll consider every single course of action. We will not sit idly by in fear, hoping and waiting. Jeffy sat up straighter, realizing what he was saying. Ricky looked around to make sure only their family was in earshot. We are a family of warriors, every single one of us. Warriors do not sit by and let the FBI do their work. We will do what we have to do. That's the way I feel anyway. We all feel that way, Joey piped in. Whatever it takes, Mark stated firmly. Bree, Ricky asked. Well, I'm hardly a warrior, but I'm with you, whatever it takes. Whatever rules we need to break, Ricky added. Absolutely, Joey murmured. Cam, Jeffy asked. No matter what happens, I'll be by your side and I'll die defending you and your family. Our family, Joey corrected. You're part of it. Cam nodded, not wanting to let them know that Jeffy had refused to marry him. What exactly are we talking about doing? Bree asked. Well, obviously, until we hear from the bad guys, there's nothing we can do, Mark said. Ricky nodded. But once we hear from them, we'll move. They want Jeffy. The feds might want her to wear wire and meet with the kidnappers. Jason, on the other hand, will not want her to be involved in any way. I'll meet with the kidnappers, Jeffy said. I want to help, and I'm not afraid. I get that, Ricky said. What I'm saying is, we won't depend on the feds or Jason to make our decisions or to keep Jeffy safe. Once we hear from the kidnappers, we'll make our own plan. If we decide to send Jeffy in, we'll be with her the entire way. We'll keep her safe, we'll follow, and we'll get Dad and Shelley back. Making pacts with the devil, are we? Keegan said as he entered the room and approached the group. Ricky stood, his eyes meeting the other man's. Cool your jets, Keno, Keegan said quietly. I'm in. Okay, and I'd prefer you not use that terminology because we're always on God's side. And I'm in too, Jeff said as he came around the corner. Not that I heard anything else, but if you think I'm going to sit by and let you guys do anything on your own without me, then think again. Jason needs to remain out of the loop, Joey said, to protect the integrity of Ameritech. Right now, Ameritech works closely with other law enforcement agencies. If we become known as a loose cannon, they'll refuse to work with us. They all nodded in agreement. So we're going to need more men, Keegan offered. Tristan, Braden, and Caleb will want in. They thrive on breaking the rules. Ricky nodded. Okay. No more talk for now. Wait until we're sure we're alone. Tell your families whatever you feel is right. Worry them, don't worry them. You each know them best. Jojo and Logan are going to want to help, Mark said. So is Eric, Ricky agreed. And don't forget John and Jacob Apple, Keegan added. Well, until later tonight then, Ricky said. Everyone is bunking down at my house until they clear the crime scene here. Speak with your families, take care of any business, and meet back together tonight in my kitchen. New scene. Eric's eyes opened slowly. The past hours had been a blur, and he had no idea how much time had passed since he and Shelley had been taken. They'd ridden in an ATV along the beach several miles before they transferred to a white van with the beach umbrella logo on it. Once in the van, Shelley came out of her semi-conscious stupor, much to Eric's relief. However, Eric's relief was short-lived, as their abductors then produced a hypodermic needle, and Shelley tried to fight them off. It was difficult to watch as two men held her down and a third injected her with a substance that put her under almost immediately. Eric had been able to get her attention and keep eye contact with her as she lost consciousness. He'd been next. He had no idea of the day or time. As far as he knew, they could have kept them out for days, even though he doubted that, as they would have needed water at the very least. He had awoken as the van was coming to a halt. It was dark outside, but he thought he saw the outline of a mountain against the sky through the back window of the van. Sensing that they would soon be leaving the van, Eric scooted closer to Shelley, and one of the men turned at his motion. Is he awake? Another man asked. Yeah, he's awake. Take care of that. There was a quick, blurred motion, sharp pain, and that was the last thing Eric remembered until now. He reached behind his head and was grateful that his fingers came back with only a minuscule amount of blood. Pushing himself up to a sitting position, he scanned the room. His eyes fell on Shelley, lying on a small gurney-type bed, pushed against the wall opposite the door. He made his way to her side and eased down onto the gurney and pulled her into his arms, leaning close to listen for her breathing. Shelley, he said softly, baby, can you hear me? She moaned and he caressed her cheek. Come on, sweetie. Wake up. Can you hear me? Her eyes blinked open. Eric, she asked, her voice gravelly. Yes, baby, it's me. Where, where are we? In some room. Pretty state-of-the-art. I'm sure we're on camera and probably might. There's no windows and one obvious door, which I assume is locked. She smiled. Well, do me a favor and make sure. He smiled back. I promise. How do you feel? I have a headache and my body hurts all over, but I think I'm okay. How about you? Ditto on the headache. Help me sit up, she said. He moved to sit on the cot and pulled her up next to him. How's that? She nodded and raised her head and looked around the room. The gray walls seemed to be made of some kind of metal because there were rivets visible at certain intervals. Lighting consisted of several recessed lamps. There was a small panel on the wall near the door with a keypad on it. Other than the gurney they sat on, there was no furniture. The floor seemed to be made of concrete and was also a solid gray. Shelley looked up at Eric, frowning. What? He asked. I just realized that you said there was one obvious door. What does that mean? Eric pointed to hardly noticeable separations in the walls on both sides. Look very closely. Those panels there look like they may open. Open to what? Well, now that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Hidden panels, secret rooms, it's like something. Shelley, Eric interrupted. Listen to me, sweetheart, because we may not have much time. He leaned close and spoke softly against her ear so that it would be difficult for a microphone to pick up his words. You realize that the reason they took us is to get to Jeffy. Shelley nodded. They want to make her come to them, and they think they can do that by giving her the opportunity to save us. And if I know Jeffy, she will try, he whispered. But Jason wouldn't let her, would he? Nor Cam, nor her brothers and sister, she whispered back. Jeffy's a smart girl, and she'll be able to get past Jason and Cam. Not that I think she'll have to get past Cam. He'll help her in anything she wants him to do. As far as her brothers and sister, I believe they will be in league with her. Anyway, the thing is, if Jeffy doesn't respond quickly, these guys are probably going to do things that will make her move faster. Shelley frowned. I'm not following you. Sweetheart, they probably plan to, he blew out a breath, to make us suffer. Shelley blinked slowly and then her body shuddered. You mean they're going to torture us? Well, torture might be a bit extreme. I'm not sure if they'll simply rough us up a bit or go to more elaborate lengths. I'm not trying to frighten you, sweetie. I'm telling you this so that you'll be prepared. Well, they won't be able to get to me. Never again. I understand where you're coming from, but if you act too brave or like what they do doesn't affect you, they may test you further. I get what you're saying, Eric, but I swore I would never let anyone get to me again like James Crane did. I won't act brave, mostly because I'm not feeling too brave. Still, I will not let them break me. I'm telling you this so that you don't worry about me. They can't get to my mind. He stroked his hand over her hair. Well, I'm proud of you, baby. His eyes bored into hers. I'm sorry, Shelley. For what, my love? For not being able to protect you. Well, you've trained me and prepared me to the best of your ability. That is how you've protected me. Now promise me you'll let those thoughts go. He sighed. I promise. Now get ready, because they won't like the fact that we're whispering and they can't hear what we're saying. As if on cue, the door burst open. Startled, Shelley jumped, then turned to her husband with a smile. You're so smart. He tried to smile, but it came across as a grimace, mostly because all three men had their weapons drawn. Get up, one ordered, using his gun to gesture towards Eric. Eric rose. Two men holstered their guns and grabbed him and shoved him across the room, while a third punched some numbers on the keypad up by the door, and the small panel opened, producing several lighted buttons. He punched one, and suddenly the hidden door in the wall to Shelley's left whooshed open, receding into the wall. Shelley peered inside the small space, no bigger than a closet, and her eyes opened wide. There were 4 large cuffs attached to the wall, 2 higher and 2 at a level near the floor, obviously for arms and legs. Eric was pushed up against the wall, his wrists placed in the armholes. The man operating the keypad pushed another button inside the panel, and the cuffs locked around Eric's wrists. That same man smiled and moved forward. He opened a metal cabinet built into the wall next to where Eric was bound, and Shelley gasped. An array of weapons came into view, knives and metal rods and whips and even something that looked like dental instruments. It looked like a scene out of a B horror movie. The man lifted a large hunting knife from its cradle and turned toward Eric, testing the knife's blade with his thumb. My name's Payne, the man said. I thought you might like to know, since I'm going to get to know you intimately over the next few days. New scene. There she is, Kimmy said. Kimmy and Marissa made their way to the front of the small theater room where Jeffy was curled up with her laptop. Ricky's and Bree's home didn't have quite as many bedrooms as the Keno mansion, but it did offer a tremendous amount of hiding places, the home theater room being one. After she'd tried to eat some of the dinner the group had thrown together, Jeffy had snuck off to try to lose herself in her work and had been madly at work on the computer when her friends found her. She looked up and gave a semblance of a smile. Are you okay? Kimmy asked. I'm fine, Jeffy answered. I'm just waiting. I thought you would have heard something by now, Marissa said. Jeffy sighed and glanced at the computer clock. 11:10 p.m. Well, it's only been 12 hours. It may take a couple of days before they actually try to contact us. I remember when Mickey first went missing, Marissa said, taking a seat next to Jeffy. Those first 24 hours were terrible. We kept waiting and waiting for a ransom note, but there never was one. Jeffy closed the laptop and smiled up at her friends. I knew you were suffering, Marissa. Mickey told me she was worried about you, and that's why I snuck up to Seattle to see you. Well, I'm glad you did, Marissa said. When you told me Mickey was alive, I felt I could finally breathe again. And if you hadn't come up there, I would have never met you, and you and Cam would have never gotten together. Jeffy smiled at the thought of her and Cam's first day together. She hadn't even known him 5 hours when she'd asked him to have sex with her just so she could have the experience. It was Cam who'd been mature enough to realize that Jeffy wasn't ready for that. I was so mad at you, Kimmy said. You snuck up to Seattle and didn't even tell me. Sorry, Kimmy. I suppose I should have told you, but there was just no time. Jeffy smiled at her. You know, you've always been a good friend. Kimmy smiled. Oh, I think it's ingrained in me. Mom is a good friend to your mom. Dad is a good friend to your dad. Of course, I would be a friend to you. Well, I mean, you've gone above and beyond. You still liked me when nobody else could stand to be around me. I think you're too hard on yourself, Marissa said. Maybe, Jeffy conceded simply because she didn't feel like arguing. Anyway, Jeffy, Kimmy said, we didn't mean to interrupt you, but Dad has asked me to come home tonight, and I wanted to say goodbye and tell you that I believe that somehow, some way, everything will turn out all right. Kimmy hugged Jeffy and pulled away. Jeffy's eyes moved to Marissa and looked her over. So, what's going on with you, Rissa? What do you mean? I'm sorry, I don't mean to pry, but I'm picking up extreme sadness. Marissa lifted her chin. I guess I'm just worried about your parents. After all, they're like parents to me, too. I mean, only a few minutes before, your dad, She stopped. Jeffy raised her brows. What? What's going on? A few minutes before my dad what? Spill it, Kimmy said. Marissa blew out a breath. I was gonna say I had a session with your dad just a few minutes before we left to go meet your plane. A session with my dad? Go on, Jeffy prodded. He's always been so kind to me. He's always told me that I could come to him about anything, but I didn't, and I should have. Did something happen to you? Is that why you've been so inaccessible? I fell in love with someone. Well, that's wonderful. No, it wasn't. He was married. You had an affair with a married man? I didn't know he was married until we'd been dating for a while, and by the time he told me, I was already head over heels. Oh, Marissa, sweetie. So lover boy tells her he's going to leave his wife and everything at home is so bad, yada, 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 Kimmy said impatiently. Long story short, Marissa continued, he dumped me, and when he did, I got into a fight with him. A fight? Yeah, I was just so mad and hurt. I went a little crazy. I kind of like how my sister did to my father, only Jeff wasn't there to protect me like he was for Mickey, and Weston beat the crap out of me. Jeffy shook her head. And he raped her, Kimmy put in. It wasn't rape. It was like one for the road. Geez, Marissa, what am I going to do with you? If he takes you against your will, it's rape, pure and simple, Kimmy argued. Jeffy took Marissa's hand. I understand, sweetie. It may not be quite the same trauma as being raped by a stranger, but it's still the same act, an act of violence against your person. Marissa's eyes filled with tears. Anyway, Kimmy said, Marissa decided to drown all her sorrows in bourbon. Bourbon and Coke, Marissa corrected. Coke? Jeffy shrieked. Coca-Cola, Marissa said defensively. For the first 2 days, it may have been bourbon and Coke, and after that it was straight bourbon, Kimmy insisted, and don't forget the Prozac. It was Paxil. Whatever. Kimmy, Jeffy said softly, you sound like you're angry. Well, maybe I am, Kimmy admitted. I mean, geez, I have 2 really good friends in the whole world, and one was on the other side of the world with vicious killers trying to blow her up, and the other one was on the other side of the country trying to kill herself. I wasn't trying to kill myself. I wouldn't do that. Well, you came pretty close for not even trying. Okay, stop, Jeffy said loudly. She smiled. It's obvious the 2 of you really love each other. I'm glad you do. I'm looking forward to having you both as lifelong friends. Jeffy rose from her chair. She was glad to have something to work on to distract her from thinking about her parents. She moved forward, sat on the floor, and patted the spaces beside her. Come sit. Intrigued, Kimmy and Marissa sat in a small circle. Jeffy held out her hands, and the 3 clasped hands. Will you allow me to pray with you? Jeffy asked, and I'd like to do a healing meditation with you. Don't you think you have much more important things to worry about right now? Kimmy asked. Please, Jeffy said. It will give me something else to focus on for a few minutes. I really need the distraction. The girls finally conceded, nodding their heads at their friend whom they trusted completely. Close your eyes, Jeffy said quietly. Dear Father. When Jeffy didn't go on, Kimmy looked up, and tears streamed down Jeffy's face. Before Kimmy could object, Jeffy finally spoke. Father, it's a difficult time right now, as I'm sure you know, since our whole family is probably inundating you with calls right now. Still, if you wouldn't mind helping us here with Marissa. She's struggling, Father. She's feeling a little lost and a little confused, and she could sure use your light in her heart right now. Bless her with peace, Father. She's done some things that she's truly sorry about, but she knows you'll forgive her and give her strength and heal her heart. Father, I won't keep you long because I know you're busy, but let me just tell you how grateful I am for these two beautiful and strong warriors who are so honorable and the truest friends a girl could have. Bless them and heal them in any way you see fit, for I know you know their hearts. We pray in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Amen, the other two girls whispered. Now, concentrate on your breathing. Neither girl was a stranger to meditation and did as instructed. Jeffy began to probe with her mind, finding mostly sadness and pain in Marissa and mostly strength in Kimmy. It made sense. Marissa's father had abused her elder sister and even tried to kill her off and had shown no regard for Marissa either. Her mother had stood by his side in everything while in a drug-induced stupor for the majority of Marissa's life. Her mother ended up trying to take her own life and died in a mental health facility. On the other hand, Kimmy was the daughter of two well-adjusted, happily married people who both were warriors for justice and deeply spiritual. Jeffy opened her heart, giving comfort and love and feelings of self-worth to Marissa, and love and understanding to Kimmy, and she went on for several minutes and began to feel lightheaded, and the meditation abruptly ended when Jeffy fell backward, her head hitting the carpet with a soft thud. "Jeffy?" Kimmy said, bending over her. When she didn't answer, Marissa jumped up. "I'll get help." Seconds later, Cameron and Ricky rushed into the room. Cam took her pulse and Ricky checked her pupils, which were dilated. Ricky scooped her up and carried her to the front of the house, calling for Lori, Justin Lee's wife, who'd been a trauma nurse. Justin and Lori came running, as did everyone else. A crowd gathered around as Lori checked Jeffy over and Kimmy told of the meditation they'd been doing. Lizzie Tanner placed a cool cloth on Jeffy's head. "Talk to me, Jeffy," Lori demanded in a firm but loving tone. Jeffy stirred. I just need some energy," she whispered. Ricky bent his head to her. "Energy?" "Yes," Jeffy said. "I tried to heal Marissa's heart. I was too drained." "Both physically and emotionally," Ricky chided. "Energy?" Jody Apple said quickly. "Got that. I can do energy. First, Miss Maddie, would you mind making her a little energy snack?" "Not at all, dear," Maddie said, scurrying off to the kitchen. "Everyone else make a circle around Jeffy," Jody ordered. "If you can touch her, do it, or touch someone who's touching her. Imagine the beautiful white light of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ coming to you from his hand, through the crown of your head to your heart, now, from your heart, down your arm and out your fingertips, and into Jeffy. Because your mind is powerful, and if you can see it in your mind's eye, it is indeed happening." The crowd of over 30 people did as instructed, even those who weren't avid meditators. Young Eric, Logan, and JoJo were big-time believers after they'd done a prayer and meditation once that brought what they believed to be their deceased loved ones to visit them. The group listened as Jody talked them through the meditation, asking for the light of the love of Jesus, the light of God, to fill them and surround them. The meditation continued for several minutes until they heard Jeffy whisper something. "Dad," she said softly. She sat up quickly. "What is it, hon?" Bree asked. I could see Dad, just for a second. He's alive. I know it. And so is Mom. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her. She's in pain, and there is blood." A murmur rose from the group. "Could you see where they are? Anything at all that might help us to locate them?" Ricky asked. "A room. They were in a room. It was all gray. There were other people there, but they were dark and in shadow. There was a wall with knives and things. It was weird. It looked like the weapons were floating in the air next to the wall. One floated in front of Dad, but he isn't afraid. He's standing. His hands are raised. I think he's attached to the wall." Jeff cursed softly and began pacing the room. Mickey tried to sniff back her tears. The picture Jeffy painted was horrifying to think about. Jeffy shook her head. "I'm sorry. That's all I can see." Ricky nodded. "How are you feeling now, Jeffy?" Cam asked, leaning over her. "I'm fine, just tired, very tired." Of course she is, bless her heart, Caroline said. All of you that came in on that plane have to be exhausted. Ricky looked them over, then looked to Bree, who'd been emotionally incapacitated since they discovered their parents missing. He started to whip out some orders when Lisa Stewart stepped in. Bree, Lisa asked suddenly, how many bedrooms are there here? Bree shook her head as if coming out of a daze. 9 upstairs. Mine and Ricky's is here on the main level, along with one more, so that's 10 altogether. She stood, wringing her hands and looking around as if she couldn't decide what to do first. I haven't been much of a hostess. Nonsense. Your family's in jeopardy. We don't expect you to play hostess. We're not here so you can take care of us. We're all here to show support for you and your family, and because we want Eric and Shelley back as much as everyone. So, if you don't mind being in the hotel business, Jody and I sort of have a knack for this type of thing. Mind if we step in and get everyone situated for the night? Bree's eyes filled. I would very much appreciate that. There's extra linens in the we'll find everything we need, and for what we don't find, we can hit up the local Wally World. Ricky held his hand up. Everyone, would you mind if I say something? Not at all, Justin said. In your parents' absence, you are the head of the Keno family. Ricky shook his head. You're the eldest, and my father's best friend. You are the head of the Keno family, Justin said again. Ricky nodded and drew a deep breath. Okay, well, those are some giant shoes to fill, he muttered. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you all for everything, for your love and support, for those of you who risked your lives to bring Jeffy home, for Toby and Caroline, laymen, who willingly participated in helping catch Locksaw, and for everyone sticking around now that our family is visited by another test. Some of you have been our friends for longer than I've been alive, and some of you we've known only a few years, but I'm grateful to all of you and amazed at the love each of you have directed towards our family, and I just wanted to say thanks. Bree, Mark, Joey, and Jeffy all nodded in agreement. Hey, no problem, Keegan answered. You guys were all there for me and my family when it really mattered. I'm happy to pay it back, and by tomorrow there will be 3 more, because Heather, Rose, and Violet are flying in to show their support. 5 more, because Grace and Brody are also flying in tomorrow, Toby announced. Eyes moist, Ricky placed his hand over his heart and tapped twice. Thank you. He then brought his hands together and bowed slowly. New scene. Eric stared obstinately at the man named Payne. He was definitely not intimidated by him or the large knife that Payne threatened him with. Shelley tried to rise, but was pushed back down onto the gurney. Payne moved forward and pulled out the front of Eric's white, blood-spattered polo shirt, inserted the knife in the placket just below the small row of buttons, and ripped the shirt in 2. He then cut the sleeves open and jerked what was left of the shirt off of Eric and tossed it to the floor. Stepping back, Payne eyed the man, assessing and calculating. If not for the slight graying hair at the temples, he could almost believe he'd captured the wrong Keno. This man did not appear to be elderly in any way, yet his dossier says he's 66. His fighting skills had been pretty amazing. Payne had no doubt that had the elderly Keno not been convinced to surrender, he would have taken out several more of Payne's men. Eric watched the man carefully, learning all he could from facial expressions and mannerisms. The man was definitely ex-military. He was also damaged goods. The tick just under the eye, the licking of the lips. This man had been traumatized in some way. He'd sold out and now was a hired killer. He's killed before, and he got off on Payne, his own as well as others. These were Eric's first impressions and assumptions. Payne moved forward again, placing the flat of his hand on Eric's chest while looking into Eric's eyes. Eric's next conjecture was that the man was gay or had gay tendencies. Eric had always lived by the live and let live rule, to each his own. He didn't judge. What other people did was between them and God. The only reason this observation was important is because homosexuality is a sin, and accepting sin consciously into one's life leads to very deep emotional problems, including anger and violence. Regardless of the fact that the homosexual tendencies probably had something to do with whatever traumas this pain person has suffered, all that meant to Eric was understanding what made him tick and what his vulnerabilities were, because Eric would use those vulnerabilities, if he could, to gain his and Shelley's freedom. Payne smiled as he moved his hand down and stroked Eric's stomach muscles and hooked his fingers in the waistband of his pants. You're going to wish you were dead by the time I get through with you, Payne promised. Eric only shrugged. You think to defile me? You cannot. It's impossible. You will only be exasperating yourself. Payne jerked his hand away as if he'd been caught in a cookie jar. His eyes narrowed in anger. He moved very close, placing the blade of the knife against Eric's cheek. Not you, he said with a laugh. Did you think I meant you? He pointed toward Shelley. I bet your old lady there would be good for some fun. He smiled at the narrowing of Eric's eyes. Still, here's something to think about. He whisked the knife down Eric's jaw, opening a slit about 2 inches long. Turning abruptly, he motioned toward Shelley. The other two men jerked her to her feet, and Payne moved quickly and grabbed her yellow blouse and tore it from her body. You can't hurt me, Shelley screamed at him, kicking her leg out at him and connecting with his knee and taking pleasure in his soft grunt. You can't hurt me, she repeated. Nothing you can do can hurt me. It's just a body. Do you hear me? It's just a body. Do what you want, but you can't touch my mind. You'll never make any kind of impression on me. You're nothing. Nothing, she spewed. He backhanded her, and she flew backward, tripping over the cot and falling beside it. The men picked her back up, and Payne punched her in the stomach. Shelley doubled over, gasping for breath. Eric decided that there will be no mercy for the man when the time comes. He stood just out of reach of Eric's legs. They hadn't bothered to strap his legs to the wall. They underestimated him because of his age. A mistake. If Payne would just back up a few inches, Eric would wrap his legs around his neck and snap it. Shelley was lifted again, and Payne drew close, fisted his hand in her hair. I'm going to enjoy doing you, he whispered. I very much doubt that, she spat back. He placed his mouth over hers, which was a big mistake. Shelley bit down. He screamed and tried to pull away, but Shelley wouldn't let go. She had his lower lip caught between her teeth. She would have ripped it off had the man behind her not pushed a blade against her throat. Let him go, or I'll kill you now, the man threatened. Shelley let go, and Payne stumbled back, holding his hand to his bleeding mouth. He stood straight. He tried to collect himself while his men beat Shelley to unconsciousness. Payne then turned to Eric. You'll both pay for that. Once your kid shows up and Black has what he wants, I'm going to have my way with the both of you. Black? Eric asked. Oh, did you think it was me who wanted your daughter? Payne said with a chuckle, holding his hand in front of his bleeding mouth. Dr. Julian Black. Once he gets through with your kid, she'll never be the same, if she lives. Turning abruptly, he moved toward the door. Take the pictures, he ordered. He waited while one of his men clicked off several photos. Once the others walked out, Payne hit the button to release Eric. Eric stumbled away from the wall and flew to Shelley's side. Payne then pushed another button, and the door to the mini torture chamber slid closed, leaving nothing but smooth metal exposed. Another button later, a door on the opposite side of the room slid open. Payne closed the box and exited, the heavy door sliding shut solidly. Eric knelt over Shelley's body and touched her face gently and was relieved when she immediately opened her eyes. I thought they might stop if I played dead, she explained. He smiled at her. Smart. You did good. Do you think I went a little too far in what I said? He did, but he wouldn't say that to her now. I think you're perfect. You're so strong, Shelley girl. I'm proud of you. He tried to smile at her, but the blood running from her nose and her bruised, swollen face kept him from it. It broke his heart to see this woman, his wife, his love, in this condition again. Yet she'd learned her lesson well all those years ago. She was definitely no victim. The men who'd beat her had no idea who she was. They didn't know she was an angel come to earth. They didn't know that had she encountered them on the street and they'd asked for assistance, she would have taken them in, fed them, clothed them, sheltered them. And if he knew Shelley, they had no idea that she's probably already forgiven them. For himself, he would have to work at that. What is that door he opened over there? Shelley asked weakly. It appears to be a bathroom. You want to check it out? Oh, that would be lovely, she murmured. Do you think you can help me up? I feel a little dizzy. Yes, Shelley, I think I can help you. She raised her hand and touched his cheek. You're bleeding. He smiled. So are you. New scene. The entire front of the theater room was now covered in wall-to-wall air mattresses with tiny gaps in between to allow for foot traffic. This room had been assigned to the teenagers. The 9 bedrooms upstairs were now occupied. Jeff, Mickey, and Marissa in one. Joey, Breeze, and their 2 girls in the second. In the third was Mark, Bella, and baby M. Keegan and Lizzie occupied number 4, while Lisa, Chaz, and Erilyn were in 5. The 6th held Toby and Caroline, and the 7th housed the younger boys, Charlie and Matt Stewart, and Daniel and Jeremy Davis. Justin and Lori occupied the 8th, and Marissa Daly held the final upstairs room. Ricky and Bree took their own room downstairs, and Maddie Stewart was given the other downstairs bedroom in deference to her age. John and Jody Apple camped out in the den, while Jeffy and Cameron had an air mattress in Ricky's office. Even though it was after midnight, the only one in the theater room presently asleep was Gabriel Tanner. The twins, Lily and Daisy, sat together on the mattress that they would share, whispering softly. Logan lay on his stomach on his mattress, his head propped in his hands, listening to Jojo and Lena, who sat in the front row of the theater seats, swapping life stories. Taylor lay on her mattress, staring at the ceiling, and Jacob Apple and young Eric Kino sat on the edge of the small stage, discussing the military and the space program. All the conversations taking place were simply a cover to keep from voicing their fears. Brow furrowed, young Eric looked around when he thought he heard someone crying. His and Jacob's conversation halted, and he scanned the room for the source. Excusing himself, he headed toward the mattress on the other side of his and eased down on it. Hey, sis, he said softly. Are you okay? Taylor sat up, unable to stop the tears that ran down her face. I can't stand it, Eric. I can't stand the thought of something happening to Grandma and Granddad. I've been lying here trying to pray and envision good things, but I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid that we'll never see them again. Oh, come on now, sis, Eric said, putting his arm around her. He held her for a few minutes before she spoke again. Well, she said. Well, what? Aren't you going to tell me everything is going to be okay? He sighed. I want to. I wish I could, but I just don't know. I guess I'm not very good at filling Dad's shoes, huh? He stood and pulled her up. Come on, maybe Mom and Dad can give us a little more information to take away some of that worry. Tugging on his sister's hand, he led her to their parents' bedroom and knocked on the door. Yeah, come in, Ricky called. Eric opened the door. Apparently his mother and sister were on the same wavelength because his mom's face was all red and swollen from crying, and his dad was standing next to her, a hand on her shoulder. Sorry to interrupt, Eric said. Ricky motioned them in. Problems? Eric nodded. Taylor's having a hard time, and I wasn't quite sure what to say. His mouth taut, Ricky nodded at his son and patted the bed next to his wife. Come sit down, Taylor. Sighing dramatically, Taylor moved forward and sat down next to her mother. Sniffing back her own tears, Bree put her arm around Taylor's shoulders. Ricky knelt down in front of his daughter. You want to talk about it? I can't stop thinking about what Grandma and Granddad must be going through. Like, are they hurt? And are they hungry or thirsty? Are they cold? Her eyes welled with tears. Do they think this is the end? Do they think they'll never see us again? Are they worried or scared? Bree's tears began anew, and she hugged Taylor harder. Ricky drew a breath. Okay, baby girl, I understand. First, I have to say, I think your thoughts are very grown up. The questions you just asked are more like what a parent might think if their child were to go missing. It's hard to believe they're the worries of a 13-year-old. She shrugged. "Well, it's just the thoughts that popped into my head. Well, they are very empathic and give evidence of the immense love that's in your heart." He cupped her face. "I'm proud of you, sweetie. Now, secondly, Dad and Shelley might be cold or hungry, but you have to know that wouldn't bother them very much at all. They would scoff at being a little uncomfortable. You know that, right?" Wiping at her tears, Taylor nodded. "And they might be hurt," Ricky continued, "but even that wouldn't bother them too much. Still, I understand that you'd be concerned about the physical things. However, Taylor, the most important thing you said is, are they afraid? And I want you to know that I'm almost positive that they are not. Dad is not innocent, and he's never lived in fear, and he's taught Grandma well. They are in this little adventure together." "I hardly call this an adventure," Bree argued. Ricky smiled. "Do you want to make a bet with me that when this is all over, they will call it exactly that?" When neither Bree nor Taylor took the bet, Ricky reached out with both hands and touched the cheeks of his wife and daughter, using his thumbs to wipe at their tears. "We'll get them back. The people who took them don't want them. They want Jeffy. If these guys were to do away with Dad and Shelley, there would be no reason for Jeffy to come to them. So rest assured they'll be okay. We will get them back." "Are you going to let Jeffy give herself up to these people?" Taylor asked. Ricky glanced over at young Eric, who still stood in the threshold. A meeting had taken place earlier that evening, and they discussed doing exactly that. "Well, this is extremely confidential, Taylor. As soon as we get the ransom note, we're going to probably let Jeffy go. But we'll be right there with her. We'll bring them all back." Young Eric smiled from his place in the doorway. He'd attended the meeting, and he was glad they weren't going to just cower down and hope they would see their grandparents again. He was looking forward to the oncoming battle, not that he thought his father would let him or his cousins anywhere near the front lines. Still, he felt proud to know that they would take care of their own. "Would you like to stay here with us?" Bree asked her daughter. Taylor nodded her head and climbed up in bed with her mom. Ricky turned to nod at Eric. "You kids, try to get some sleep down there." "Yes, sir," Eric said as he pulled the door closed and headed back to the theater room. New scene. Joey checked on the girls, making sure both Sophia and baby Kelson were sound asleep on their little pallets before he crawled into bed with his wife. The moment his weight hit the bed, Bree turned over, her eyes searching his. "I thought you were asleep," he said wearily. "I can't sleep." Sighing, he pulled her closer. "We'll get them back." "I believe you." She ran her hand over his chest. "I really do. I have all the faith in the world that you'll get them back safe and sound. I hate to think of what they might be going through, though." He hated it, too. His mother, his sweet, sweet mother. But she was tough. "Try not to think about it," he said. When she didn't answer, he patted her belly. "Breeze?" Pulling away, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and went to the window, staring out at the night. And Joey sat up and watched his beautiful wife as she wrung her hands together and fretted. His brows rose in anticipation. I, I need to tell you something." He nodded carefully. "Well, if you're getting ready to leave me, could you wait just a few days before you lower the boom?" "Joey, I'm serious. I was going to tell you before, but then you had to go to Kazakhstan, and I thought it would be better if you didn't have this to distract you." He rose and moved toward her, a feeling of dread simmering in his gut. "Okay." "And then you got home today, and I was going to tell you, but, well, you know what happened then. Tell me, Breeze, whatever it is, we can work it out." She nodded. "Well, it's not like I think anything needs to be worked out, and I'm sorry for telling you under these trying circumstances. But I really think that you should know. Breeze, I'm pregnant." His mouth fell open, the tension releasing immediately. "Oh." "Oh?" He smiled. "I mean, are you upset by this?" She shrugged. "Well, I know we hadn't planned to have another baby so soon, but, I mean, I don't know how I couldn't be happy about having your baby." "Then you're okay with it." "Are you?" She smiled. He smiled. "I'm ecstatic, but I know it's hard on your body. Kelson is only 15 months old. She nodded. They'll be about 22 months apart. That's not quite as bad as Sophia and Kelston. They're only 19 months apart. Joey only nodded, thinking how much his mother would love to hear this news. What's wrong? Breeze asked. Joey shrugged, thinking about Mom and how happy this would make her. She knows. I told her and the other women when Lizzie Tanner announced her pregnancy to everyone while you guys were gone. Lizzie? You're kidding me. Breeze tried to smile. It was so hard to feel happiness about anything when whatever was happening to Shelley and Eric was like a dark cloud blotting out any light. No, not kidding. Lizzie and Keegan are going to have another baby. Joey understood the note of sadness in her words and pulled her close. Breeze, sweetheart, I swear to you now, you and Mom are going to be together making all the plans for this new baby very soon. Breeze nestled her head against her husband's hard chest, taking comfort in the ridges of muscle and sinew. She once thought Joey was arrogant and cocky. Not cocky, confident, he'd told her, and he'd proven over and over that his confidence was well-founded. She would have to trust in his confidence now. Eric and Shelley were coming home. New scene. Justin Lee watched as wife Lori ran her comb through her short, blonde locks. He could see her through the open bathroom door. She wore her usual T-shirt for bed. Her simplicity was one of the things that attracted him to her. His wife was an amazing woman. She was quiet, but not shy, because she certainly spoke up when she had an opinion. She was strong, both physically and emotionally. She was intelligent and confident, as one had to be as an ER trauma nurse. That's where he'd met her, at the hospital on the day Ricky had fought with Tommy Crane and a stray bullet struck Bree. Lori no longer worked at the hospital. She taught college classes at the nursing school at Caltech. There was a time Justin had thought he'd never find anyone to love like his friend Eric had found Shelley. He faulted Shelley for that. Admittedly, Justin had been a little in love with Shelley. Everyone who met her felt the same way. Then Lori came into his life and everything changed. He was so proud of Lori. He was 14 years her senior, but so far that hadn't been an issue. She hadn't been able to have children, which was probably one of the reasons she'd been available when he met her. Rather than cry, woe is me, over being able to have children, Lori adopted the entire Keno clan to mother and take care of. Given Eric and Shelley held the esteemed position of heads of the Keno family, Lori made herself their rock. A sturdy pair of hands, help with a skinned knee or a bruised heart. She loved the newest babies as if they were her own and was always available for questions from the new mothers. She was a non-emotional voice of reason in times of trouble, times like now. And Justin considered how Lori's presence was so much like Eric's. She had a calmness about her. She was like Eric in so many aspects. Justin thought of her as the female version of his best friend. It was obvious they were meant to be together. The bathroom door opened and he caught her eye, and she smiled and came to him, standing between his knees and wrapping her arms around his neck. Are you stressing, Justin? She asked softly. He chuckled. You think you know me so well, don't you? Believe it or not, I wasn't. I was being grateful. Well, I'm so proud of you, she purred. Let's continue with that theme. What are you grateful for? For you, he said. She smiled at him, and I am so grateful for you, Justin, for your unassailable love of me, and I'm proud of you. For what? Well, just for being you, your quiet strength. I know it's killing you, what's happened to Eric and Shelley. You've known Eric longer than anyone. I know you're trying so hard to not worry. You're being strong for the family. I have to say, I'm happy that Ricky recognized your place, not only as the eldest or the one who's known his father the longest, but he was nodding to you as head of the family. Yet you gave him the nod, the okay to take over in his father's absence. Justin shrugged. Well, the best way to honor Eric in his absence is to honor his son. Lori's eyes moistened. Grabbing Justin's strong hands from her waist, she squeezed them in her own. Oh, Justin, you see? That's why I love you so much. Leaning down, she kissed him tenderly. New scene. Mickey's eyes welled with tears before they spilled over onto her cheeks. She and Jeff listened quietly as Marissa's story tumbled out. Marissa's chin trembled as she spoke about her feelings of inadequacy and of feeling alone. But Rissa, you know I've always been here for you. I would never turn you away, Mickey complained. Well, I know that, but you and Jeff were so in love and you had the boys to occupy your time. You didn't need me hanging on like a red-headed stepchild. Well, now you're just being insulting, Jeff said. We love you, Rissa. You're much more than just my sister-in-law. You're a member of this family, and just as important as Jeremy or Daniel or Mickey or me, a full-fledged member. And when you went away to college, we all felt sick with missing you. Marissa looked up. Get real. It's true, Mickey said. Jeff kept saying he was going to fly out to New York and check on you, and I kept telling him you'd be embarrassed by that. Marissa gave a soft laugh. I wouldn't have minded. I mean, to have a good-looking guy show up at my dorm, I would have been the envy of everyone. I hate that I didn't realize what a hard time you were having, Mickey said. I mean, I guess I should have. Our mother killed your father, and then she died in a mental institution. You make him sound like the victim, Marissa said. My father abused you and tried to have you killed, and Mom killed him in some belated effort to save you. She shook her head. Grandmaster Kino tried to help me get through all these feelings. He was helping me, but then I went away to school, and he made me promise that I would go see this woman he recommended. But I was so busy, and it was just too easy to put it off. I thought I was fine. I thought I didn't need any more counseling until I spoke to him again earlier today. Marissa's lips trembled. Was it just today? She glanced at her watch. About 14 hours ago, it seems like forever. Jeff, what are we going to do without the Kinos? Okay, now, stop that. We'll get them back. We will. And I want a promise from you that when they're back and everything is settled down, you'll make an appointment with Eric and get your life back in order. I'll try, Marissa said meekly. Mickey hugged her sister. We'll help you, Rissa. You're part of our family, and Jeff and me and the boys will help you. Yeah, Jeff thought. And I think I'll begin by paying a visit to the guy in New York. He won't get away with what he did to Rissa. New scene. You want me to take her? Mark asked, watching his wife struggle with their 1-year-old daughter, who wasn't showing any signs of calming down and going to sleep. Bella gave a hopeless shrug. I guess she's picking up on everyone's anxiety. He rose and took Emily from his wife and bounced her in his arms. Go lie down, Bella. You're exhausted. Frowning, Bella did as instructed, even though she was sure she wouldn't sleep either. She only obeyed to help relieve Mark from worrying about her, along with worrying about everything else. He paced back and forth like an anxious tiger, Bella thought. However, the pacing was working, for Em had stopped fussing and was riding quietly in his arms. Emily, with her dark hair and brown eyes, was the princess of the family. Her brothers doted on her as if the world began and ended with her. She was their little miracle. Actually, Bella's new life was a miracle. 5 years ago, she was abused and imprisoned and could never have imagined such a wonderful life waiting for her. She was now married to Mark, so strong, so peaceful, so protective, and so loving. Her son Logan, feeling loved and accepted for the first time in his life, had been adopted by Mark as a true son and by Jojo as a true brother, and the joy in his eyes made Bella grateful every day. And then along came Emily, loud and boisterous and demanding. They'd had to go to Eric and Shelley for parenting tips in case she grew up to be a horrible shrew. Both had been so helpful without trying to take over or be intrusive. Bella loved them like they were her own parents. She looked over as she realized Mark had somehow lured Em to sleep. He laid her down gently on the pallet they'd made, covered her tiny body with a soft blanket, and came to sit on the side of the bed. Bella reached up and rubbed his back. Thanks, hon. I'm so glad you have the magic touch. Mark sighed. Try to rest. Well, what about you? I may go for a walk on the beach. She rose onto her knees and came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Oh, Mark, please don't go out alone. I understand you're upset, but please don't go alone. If you don't want to talk to me, find someone. He turned, surprised by her words. Why would you think I don't want to talk to you? Well, you want to go walk alone on the beach. Well, I'd take you if I thought Em wouldn't wake up. Then just stay here and talk to me. He rubbed his hands over his face. My mother, he began, then stopped when his voice broke. Bella waited patiently while he got himself under control. Everyone talks about my mother as being so strong, and she is. Eric has really helped her and taught her, but still, there's this vulnerability. When she hears something on the news about some awful thing someone has done, she gets this look of shock on her face, followed by a pained expression. She can't even imagine someone committing some heinous act. And that's good, I suppose, but in my mind, that makes her vulnerable. Bella thought carefully. You don't want her to lose that childlikeness she wears so well. I guess that's it. I mean, what is she experiencing? Is she frightened? Is she with Eric, or have they separated them? And which one of those options would be better? And the not knowing is making me crazy. And I hate to think of anyone hurting her, and Eric too. I mean, he's my hero, you know? I thought Ricky was your hero, Bella said with a smile. Mark nodded. Yeah, Ricky too. But I mean Eric, he came into our lives when Mom was so lonely and Dad was gone. And when Eric came, everything changed for the better. He taught us so much. He made me the man I am today. You made you, Mark. He may have directed and pushed, but you made the choices and did the work. Mark smiled. That's the same thing he would say. He shook his head. I hate to think of what could be happening to him, to them. I keep coming up with all these scenarios. Well, you're supposed to be imagining positive outcomes. Yeah, I know, but Eric killed one of their men, and I'm thinking they're not happy about that. I hope they don't decide to retaliate by taking his life, or worse, by doing something to Mom. Bella reached around and took his face in her hands. You wipe those thoughts from your mind, Mark. I know it's hard, especially when it's your own mother we're talking about, but you're strong and you can do it. You have to practice what you preach. Mark drew a deep breath and nodded his head. You're right. Of course you're right. Guess that's why I wanted to walk alone, so that you wouldn't see me being weak. Never. You aren't showing weakness. You're showing that you're human, and even you, the great Mark Adams, needs to vent. He gave her a small smile. I'm really glad you're on my side. She kissed him softly, just like you've always been on mine. Come to bed, Mark. You're going to need to be rested for whatever tomorrow brings. As you wish, he quoted from one of the family's favorite movies. New scene. Caroline looked up at her husband and he came into their assigned bedroom. He was a lovely man to look at, dark hair, cobalt blue eyes, tall and fit. His eyes, however, seemed to reflect exactly what she was feeling: worry, stress, fatigue. Who were you talking to out in the hall? She asked. Toby offered Carol a weak smile. Chaz. He's making a run to the store, and I was making a donation. Maddie wants to cook breakfast in the morning. It's awfully late to go grocery shopping. Toby shrugged. It's not like he can sleep. Caroline sighed. That's true, because I know I'm way too keyed up to sleep. I keep trying to think that this time next week everyone will be home safe and sound and back to planning parties, Toby said. Do you really think Eric and Shelley will be okay? Carol asked. I can think nothing else, darling. All I know is I hope to be some support to Ricky and the family. Way back before you and I were married and you'd gone missing and then ended up in the hospital, I'll never forget that Ricky and Bree took time to fly all the way across the country to offer their assistance. Ricky is a good friend, loyal, and always wanting to be of service. He says he's not even close to being like his father, but he's more like his father than he realizes, and I want to help him. Your presence here adds to his strength, Toby. I'm sure of it. Thanks, baby, Toby said, as he sat on the bed and unbuttoned his shirt. At least we'll be able to actually do something to help tomorrow. Justin has asked you and I to be family spokespersons tomorrow at a press conference, since we're used to handling the spotlight. The FBI and Jason will fill us in on what they want to say and not say. Are you in? Oh, of course, anything I can do to help. Toby thought of how his shy little Caro used to be such a wounded bird, and now, since helping to run a famous dance school, being a guest choreographer on America Can Dance, and finally being in the spotlight as a judge, she'd been transformed into a savvy celebrity. Sighing, Toby stripped down to his boxers and laid on the bed. I keep thinking about my mother and father and how I'd feel. Carol settled down in the crook of his arm, lying her head on his chest. I know. I keep thinking about the Stillwaters, since they're the closest thing to parents that I have. I'd be going crazy out of my mind if it was them. I have to say, Bree is remarkably strong. So stoic. Well, the entire Keno family is amazing, Toby said. Their selfless love and kindness. Oops. Their selfless love and kindness, their strength and unity, and their calm under pressure is stuff heroes are made of. When I grow up, I want to be just like them, he said with a smile. She raised up to look in his eyes. Oh, Toby, don't you know? You are like them. You've always been my hero, and every day when I pray, I thank God for you. You brought me so much. For that matter, you are the reason I even know to pray, because it was you who brought God into my life. It was you who brought God back into my life, because even though you didn't know it, you were his before you were born. So, Princess, what say we pray right now and ask him to bring Eric and Shelley back safe and sound? Immediately, Carol scooted out of bed onto her knees, and Toby joined her, took her hands in his, and they prayed. New scene. And how long before we hear something? Jeffy asked as she paced. Cam didn't answer. It was a rhetorical question. She'd just rattled off a string of them. He watched as she went on. She'd showered and changed into one of Taylor's nightshirts with a picture of Tweety Bird on the front. His eyes were drawn to her muscular thighs as she padded barefoot back and forth. Her long, dark curls hung loosely down her back, swinging out and landing gently whenever she reached the end of her route and turned sharply. When she came to an abrupt halt and dramatically pounded her fists against her head, he decided it was time to intervene. Rising from the lotus position he'd taken on the floor, he approached her and turned her to face him. Jeffy, if it was Ricky who'd been taken and your father was standing here in this room right now, what do you think he'd be saying to you? The wildness in her eyes left as she focused on the question, but after only a second she shook her head. I don't know. That's why I need him. He gave her a shake. Stop. You do know. Now calm yourself, center your being, and answer the question. Jeffy drew a deep breath and nodded her head and closed her eyes. Several moments later, she opened them. He would say that it was okay to feel the worry and stress. He would tell me to face it and wallow in it completely, and when I've accepted the moment and stopped resisting what is, I'll feel much better. Cam smiled. That sounds exactly like what he would say. Do you believe in his teachings? Well, yes, of course I do. Well, then honor him by following his counsel. He pulled her down to sit. Let's wallow. Come on, talk me through it. Cam listened intently as Jeffy voiced all her worries, all her fears, said the things everyone feared. She cried, she fretted, and finally she calmed as she accepted the moment for what it was, painful. When she'd been quiet for some time, Cam reached over and squeezed her hand, and she opened her eyes and offered a tiny smile. Thank you, Cam. It feels good to know I can turn to you and that you understand. Understand what? She shrugged. Everything. You understand me, my family, what my father was all about, and therefore what I'm all about. She brought his hand to place it over her heart. I'm so glad that you came back to me, that you worked so hard to make it work between you and me. You have an incredible amount of love in your heart. Love for you, Jeffy. Love for us. But if I'm being honest, I gotta say I don't want you to think I'm too noble. I also love what I do. It wasn't much of a sacrifice to work hard and train and allow your father and Ameritech to train me. There are hundreds of applicants trying to get into Jason's program. I was lucky. Well, still, I'm touched by your motivation, and through all that training and all those years, you never forgot your love for me. My love for you is what kept me going. She closed her eyes and sighed. I'm so tired, she said, exhausted in both body and spirit. Or come here on the mattress and I'll give you a massage. Hopefully you'll fall asleep before I finish. Accepting, she stretched out on the mattress. Deciding that she needed to focus on something as he massaged her, he chose a topic he'd read in one of her manuals. Tell me about the effect that processed foods has on the body. Eyes closed, Jeffy began to expound on the benefits of pure food choices and the cancer-causing chemicals and processes used in most all foods. It would be some time before the lecture was over. And that is the end of chapter 12.